Well, as you know, Peace and Justice Studies Association is the largest collection of scholars, educators, and researchers, and so why are we doing that here? Selkirk College actually has one of two undergraduate peace studies programs west of Winnipeg. So we are a bit of a unique college in not only BC but in Western Canada, and we have a long history of peacemaking in the area. We have the Doukhobor is a pacifist sect. We have the war resistors who came up from the States during the Vietnam War. We have a long-standing Quaker community that actually also came up here, plus all other kinds of activists and issues. We also have issues of injustice here that have not yet been fully dealt with, such as we're living on unceded territory. The Sinixt indigenous people are extinct and they have no recognition, and this is where they have lived for thousands of years. So not only the interesting past, but also the current situation. It's a perfect time and a perfect place to have a conference on peace and justice.
Do you think that this type of conference would help to bring some resolution or at least manage the conflict that exists?
I think what it does most of all, what conference do, is it raises awareness. So, hundreds of people who are working on the front line are now much more aware of these issues than they were before.
Do you see any difference between, say, 10 years ago and today?
On specific issues or locally, per se?
Locally, yeah.
I think, things are getting uncovered. That's what I would say. There's a lot more awareness now than there was 10 years ago. And that's directly a result of activists. For example, just the Sinixt issue. Sinixt activists, their allies, non-Indigenous allies, are really willing really working to raise awareness on this issue. So I think sometimes, in fact, things have become more contentious, but often that's a sign of progress, right? So I would think things are. It's a long battle, and I would just say the short answer is there's more awareness now than there was 10 years ago. So that's part of the struggle.
And how about internationally? Is Canada doing any better after all these conferences? Because we've had peace conferences in Vancouver and peace conferences here in Toronto. Do you think the government is any farther looking at the light of peace after all this education?
Well, it's hard to measure the impact of one conference, right? It's impossible to measure exactly what the impact is. But again, I think that sometimes we think the world is getting worse because of the evening news, right? Yeah. And I think if you look at trends, short-term trends, long-term trends, there's so much evidence to show that, in fact, things are getting better. Sometimes we have blips. And so there's often there's less stability or there's more contention. But again, that's the result of uncovering issues, uncovering violence, like direct violence or structural violence. And so uncovering those things is part of the process to make things better.
Right.
So we're doing more than just singing songs here, right? We're talking about very contentious issues and making people uncomfortable, and that's part of the process to make things better.
That's right. And perhaps you're not going to resolve the problem even in our lifetime.
Right.
But at least we feel good that we're doing what we can.
Yeah, and I think the goal, if you look at a culture of peace, it's not that we are going to do away with conflict. I think it's finding processes, meaningful and nonviolent processes to address conflict, and that's part of what a culture of peace is. To actually work on a process, not necessarily looking for utopia, but looking at what our journey looks like.
14 million people walked against the war in Iraq during the Bush administration. The war went on anyway, and right now we shift our troops from Iraq to Afghanistan to the Middle East. We might shift the furniture a little bit by bringing 2 planes out of the 6 or 8 and leaving some others and bringing more troops. So I wonder if we are just dribbling from one problem to another, and is there any progress?
Yeah, I think if you look at a specific case study, like you say, how many 14 million people, and then the Iraq War still happened. And so you look at that kind of taking it out of the bigger context, sometimes it looks like, how will we ever make progress? Yeah. Again, you look at the long-term trends, and you can definitely see empirical evidence to show that, in fact, we are becoming less and less violent. So the answer is all of these things work. And you know, there's a film that came out in the last year on those big protests that happened during Bush, and said, wow, the real kind of the next step, the Iraq War still happened. But it's impossible to measure all the long-term sequelae that came out of that huge movement. And I think there's evidence to show, though, that in fact, even if the Iraq War still happened, the ramifications are still around us. We didn't invade Iran.
Not yet.
No. And I think we are really close to invading Iran.
Yeah.
And perhaps we could say, I don't hear anyone saying it, but perhaps we could say that those Iraq war demonstrations had an impact on us not invading Iran.
Yeah, but I'm not being critical, because I do realize that some changes don't happen overnight.
Right.
Women's right to vote didn't come in 10 years. It was probably 100 years, and the women that started it probably died before the change was witnessed. So you're doing what you're doing. It doesn't mean that if tomorrow there's a war, your work was in vain.
Right.
So I'm not being critical, but just
No, it's a good question.
Just talking about what are we doing? Are we going somewhere?
Right.
Maybe not, but it doesn't matter, because you have to do what you have to do.
Right.
Right. Well, thank you very much for organizing this conference.
My pleasure.
Nice meeting you.